Hi everyone, welcome back. Today's video is going to be on one of my favorite colors in makeup, which is the shade Coral. So it is the very end of March right now. It is snowing heavily outside, which I really like, but the end of winter and into the spring and summer season is when I tend to wear a lot of coral. So I want to talk about a few items that I kind of pull out every season. I do believe every single one of these is currently available, so you can get your hands on them if you're looking to add a little bit more coral to your life. Now, coral is one of those shades that people have a lot of varying opinions on. I like a coral that's quite orange pink and quite deep, like very vibrant and bright, but I know a lot of people see coral as more of like a paler orange, somewhat neon, but verging more towards peach. So I've kind of got an array of shades here of the color coral, but most of them do lean to the deeper, brighter side of things. I do have a lot of coral in my collection, so I decided to split this video into two. On Thursday, oh my god, what is that? Ugh. Cat hair. Since I do have a lot of coral in my collection, I've decided to split this video into two. Today I'm going to be showing you a lot of blush and eyeshadows that go with blush, but on Thursday you'll be able to see 5 different shades of coral lipstick that I really enjoy and will be pulling out in the next few months. So you're kind of getting a lot of coral this week. I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to kick this off with a blush that was the very first blush I ever owned, and when I first saw this picture on Tumtalia, I was smitten. It is the Tarte blush in the shade Blissful. And if I had to pick the perfect shade of coral, this would be it for me. It is quite pink, but there's a lot of orange in it as well. It's also matte, which I really appreciate, but it's also really vibrant. It's really bright. It's verging on neon, and that's what makes me love it so much. I do use a stippling brush for the Tarte blushes just because I feel like they're a little bit stiffer and it just kind of diffuses a little bit better with a stippling brush. The e.l.f. small stipple brush or the MAC 130, I think it is, work best for me. I just jab it in the product and then sort of like tap it onto the apple of my cheek and then sort of like circular tap it out. That works the best for the Tarte blushes for me, and this shade, I mean, honestly, it just makes me so happy. So whenever I think of a coral blush, when I want to match my makeup, this is the first one I go to, and I'm really surprised that I haven't hit pan on it yet because I love this one dearly. Tarte did have a blush called Tipsy that I am so sad I never got my hands on, and they've long since discontinued it. That was more of an orange shade of coral. I think I like this one better, but because I love coral so much as a whole, I wish I had both so I could kind of like go back and forth between the two. But Blissful still really has my heart, and it's still in their current lineup of blushes, which is nice because so many of the blushes that they've had over the years have been completely discontinued, but luckily this one still lives on. If you're looking for a little bit more of an inexpensive blush, because the Tarte ones are quite pricey, I think they're more than $30 now, which is quite a lot of money. The ones by Milani in the rose pan are some of the best that I've ever tried, but this shade in particular is obviously one that I'm drawn towards because it's called Coral Cove. And there's so much product in here, it's unreal. There's 17 grams of product. I don't even have a bronzer that big. Usually face powders kind of stop around the 10 or 11 gram mark. This thing is an absolute beast. I would love to see somebody pan this. Like, I'm curious if anybody ever actually has. And I mean, it must have happened at this point, but I feel like this is one of those never-ending blushes. So Coral Cove is very similar to Blissful. If you hold them side by side, you can see that to me, Coral Cove has a little bit more orange in it compared to Blissful. But honestly, on the skin, they basically look the same. So I kind of, you know, go between the two. I do reach for the Tarte one more, but this one is still equally good. It applies very, very well on the face. I don't use a stippling brush with this one. I use something a little bit wider of a brush, like the Real Techniques blush brush. One of the easiest ways to wear coral for me is basically what I'm wearing right now. I'll put a ton of coral through the crease and then put on a coral blush and a coral lip. You don't necessarily need to do the eyes, but you can incorporate bits of coral that way, and it kind of makes it a little bit more seamless without being too much. So the Milani Rose blushes are readily available at pretty much every drugstore, and they're also now in Canada. I mean, they have been for a few years, but I feel like I used to always have to schlep them home from the US whenever I was on vacation. So it is nice that they are available in Canada. I think they're around the $15 mark, but it's been a while since I checked. Anyway, this is just a nice drugstore option if you don't want to spend high-end prices, and honestly, it's just as good as high-end. There is no difference in the quality of Milani blushes compared to high-end ones. I find I do gravitate towards more high-end products. Don't really know why, just always have. But the drugstore Milani Rose blushes in particular pretty much are the same as high-end blushes as far as I'm concerned. In sticking with the drugstore, I have to recommend this blush palette by Sleek. Now, I did pick this up when I was in the UK several years ago, but Sleek is currently available at Ulta, which is fantastic. So if you're in Canada, you'd have to order online, but if you're in the US, you're in luck because you can get it at Ulta. You can also order from Sleek's website, and I think it's pretty inexpensive shipping to North America, which is really nice. But in terms of accessibility for Canadians, it's not as great. So this blush palette is the shade Lace, and it's got 3 different colors in here, which I actually think kind of round out coral as a whole very well. The coral that I really like is this shade over here. It's more vibrant, it's brighter, it's more neon. That's the shade that I'm always drawn towards. But if you're somebody that likes a little bit more of an orange coral, this shade over here is more up your alley. So you can kind of pick and choose which coral you're feeling for the day. The shade in the middle is kind of, it's a weird hybrid of both shades. It's kind of like the base of this color, just muted down a little bit. And then it's like they're taking the orange as a shimmer and jamming it into that pan. It's a really interesting blush, and it's not one I'm necessarily drawn towards as much because I do like a more matte blush, and the ones on the ends are matte. But it is an interesting shade of coral that I think a lot of people would like. Anyway, for me, this palette is mostly all about this color, and I always get confused with the shades on the back. I don't know if this one is actually Chantilly or if it's Crochet, because you know, sometimes the shade on the back represents the shade that's right behind it, not necessarily how you would read the pan. Anyway, whatever the shade name of this one, it is my absolute favorite. I've gravitated towards that color so many times over the years, and I was so happy when I picked it up in the UK. I think it was 5 years ago. I saw it in stores and I was like, yes, everybody's talking about this online. Now I get to own it, and it's really just been a great coral palette for me. If you'd like to pick up a more high-end coral blush palette, you can take a look at Smashbox. So this came out a few years ago now, but they're still available. It's the LA Lights Blush and Highlight Palette, and this one in particular is called Culver City Coral. Now, the way that they kind of promoted this palette was that you had a dark coral here, a light coral here, and then kind of a coral highlighter on the end. I don't like the highlighter. I don't think it does a whole lot, so I would kind of just disregard that shade. I'm all about these 2 colors over here. The darker color I do think tends to go a little bit better with eye looks that I'm putting together, which is funny because it's not the brighter one of the 2. It's definitely quite dark, and it has a bit more of an orange tone to it. So if you're more drawn towards orange, you might like that shade more. But if you like something a little bit brighter and a little bit more pink, the shade in the middle really works out for that. That being said, if you're buying a blush palette, you should like all of the shades in it. So I mean, I do go back and forth between the 2 colors. It really just depends on how my eye look comes out, or even what lip color I'm going to wear. Because if I'm wearing something that's a little bit more pink toned on my lips, I'm gonna want something that's a little bit more of a coral pink base as opposed to a coral orange base like I see this shade over here. The shade on the end, they do call it a coral highlighter, but honestly, I would never apply that and think it was a highlighter. It's just not luminescent enough on the face. If you're very, very fair, you could wear that as a true blush because it does have enough pigment in it, and it's not luminous that it looks like you're just putting like a disco ball in your cheek. Anyway, this palette's beautiful, and if you're a true coral lover, I think you'll enjoy it. It's nice to have really compact packaging too. Like, it's really quite small. There's a mirror in there. Super nice palette to have by Smashbox. So let's say you're deciding that you want to wear a coral lip, and you're probably going to put a coral blush with it as well. Sometimes people don't know what to put on their eyes, and I did mention earlier that I tend to opt for a coral crease because that'll kind of tie the whole look together. So I thought I'd mention 2 different palettes that will work with coral shades that you're going to be putting on your face. The first one is probably going to be no surprise, and I'm sure people are just tired of this palette being mentioned whenever anybody brings up peach or coral. but it's the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. I mean, I couldn't really not mention it because I feel like this palette is just kind of one of the easiest palettes to grab if you're going to be wearing a lot of coral. So for today's look, I do have candied peach through my crease, and that's mostly where I wanted to keep the color. I just wanted to really show off a peach shade, but it didn't have to be all over my lid, you know? I could just take that color, swipe it through my crease, and then grab any other color, put it on the lid, and call it a day. It just makes for a really easy look, and you're kind of not overdoing it either. So today I opted to put one of the browns on my lid, which is not something I normally do, but I wanted to show you that it is easy to incorporate a coral shade into your eyeshadow without going overboard. I know a lot more people are comfortable with neutrals than they are colors, but you can grab a brown, put it on your lid, and then put a bright, vibrant coral in the crease, and it just acts as your transition shade, but it's also colorful. So I just wanted to showcase how this palette can work really well with coral colors, and it's all because coral and peach are basically the same thing. They're like a pink orange color, but you need other colors to work with it. Most people are not comfortable just throwing coral all over their eye and calling it a day. So I feel like something like this with a lot of warm toned, almost orange based neutrals can really help you create an eye look that is going to have a lot of neutrals in it, but can still really incorporate a little bit of coral and then put more coral on your face with a lipstick and a blush. And of course, I will take any opportunity to mention this palette because it really is one of my favorites in my collection, and it is a permanent product now, thankfully. Remember when it was limited edition? That didn't go over so well. So permanent product for Too Faced, and definitely one of my favorites ever. The other palette I wanted to mention is the brand new Naked Reloaded by Urban Decay, and it's primarily because there's a chunk of colors in here that work really well for what I just described with the Sweet Peach palette. And that is these shades right in here, from Angel Fire, Retro, Reputation, Burn, and Endgame, and even the shades Bucked and Boundaries over here. Those colors work so well with corals because they're that warm toned brown with peach in it. They're not just a brown with a little bit of orange, you know what I mean? Like, there's more to them than that. Retro right here, I know it always looks quite bland on the viewfinder, that's what I'm looking at right now, but on the eyes, it behaves pretty much the same way that the candied peach color looks on my eyes right now. It is really vibrant, it's really bright, and I love that it's basically a coral in this palette, which was completely unexpected. And that shade works out really well with all the ones that are kind of beside it, because you can create the exact same look that I've got on my eyes with these ones right here. Take a neutral, put it all over your lid, whack that coral in the crease, and call it a day. And it'll be absolutely beautiful, and it will work with other coral shades that you're going to be wearing. This palette turned out to be kind of a surprise hit for me. I was not expecting to like it as much as I do, and I mean, I'm still not keen on this weird cushiony packaging that feels like fabric. But in terms of working with coral colors, it's excellent. There's everything you need in here because a lot of it leans quite peach warm. So really happy about this one, and I will be incorporating it quite a bit in the spring and summer with all the other coral shades that I'm gonna be wearing on my face. So that's gonna be it for this video. As I mentioned at the beginning, I will be showcasing 5 different shades of coral lipstick in Thursday's video, so stay tuned for that if that's something that you're interested in. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.